The 2025 NHL playoffs are getting underway here. We are through a couple of games for a number of series, and the playoffs are definitely playoffing. Let's chat about that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at @LivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we have some updates from both the East and Western Conference playoffs. Things have been heating up, and series outside of, the Jets-Blues one are certainly holding our attention for a lot of reasons. Perhaps for future consideration for the Jets should Winnipeg advance, perhaps for just comedic purposes, because some teams that we are perhaps rooting against have had a crazy, crazy start to the playoffs. Well, what else is new, right? The Jets also have a little bit of injury update news, and we'll chat about how that might impact the upcoming games for Winnipeg in St. Louis in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about the Western Conference playoffs. And before we did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, in the West, things are a little bit chaotic. The first couple of playoff games are actually still ongoing. We have one right now that is in progress, Vegas versus Minnesota. That series has been fascinating to watch. The first game, I think we already talked about, and Minnesota was actually playing reasonably well against the Knights. The problem for the Wild is that in many ways, you look at their roster construction, and in the first game, they are built to play pretty stingy defensive hockey, but, Vegas has a lot more scoring depth. They have, a fair few extra double-digit scores over Minnesota, and it's not really shocking. I mean, Vegas has always been a fairly deep team, but the Wild still defended pretty well. So you thought, maybe if Minnesota can get their top line going a little bit more, and if they can find a way to squeeze through, maybe they can make this series a little bit longer. And wow, they have responded. Right now, Minnesota is up 4-1 over the Knights. And while Vegas has started to claw back into this game, they've gotten a single goal. I think the bigger storyline here is that, the Knights weren't really coming out of this one prepared. And so if this scoreline holds, you are looking at a 1-1 series, which I'm not sure anyone really expected, right? I've certainly slandered Minnesota plenty of times. I will say in one respect, this Knights team compared to previous years, I don't feel that they are as airtight and locked down as they were in previous years. I think that they're still a very good team, but they are a little more vulnerable. They're a little older, and they are not as elite and deep as they used to be. Still, one of the best teams in the league and still playing a style of hockey that has in the past given, teams like the Jets absolute fits. But I don't think that this year is quite the same as some of their other cup aspiration seasons. So, this team should be interesting to watch. Maybe Minnesota can at least stretch it to 5 or 6, right? Again, if the scoreline holds, it's a minimum of 5, possibly 6 if Minnesota takes a game on home ice. And maybe if they somehow, get a couple of games here over the next couple of weeks, maybe things get even more interesting. Maybe Minnesota even drags the series out or perhaps pulls off a huge upset. Do I anticipate that happening? No, but it is something of interest. Minnesota, I think, is a lot more preferable for a potential, later seed than Vegas, especially if you're the Jets. The other ultra-relevant series for Winnipeg is, of course, Dallas, Colorado. Now, when last we were recording, Dallas was trailing the Avs, but now, here comes an interesting result. Again, the series is split 1-1. Dallas forced overtime and ended up winning on a Colin Blackwell goal to make it, a tied series, a split series, which for, the Stars, I think not many people were predicting. I wouldn't say that I necessarily expected the Avs to just walk over Dallas, but I do think that, the Stars are pretty beat up. They're now missing Robertson for, the next couple of games, probably for the whole series. He's also week to week in the same vein that Ehlers is, so I would not expect him back. And you were already down Haskin, and so things were pretty grim, right? This Avs team is deeper than it was at the start of the season. They're fast, they're skilled, and so it presented some really big challenges and mismatches. But the Stars dug deep. They played some of their best hockey that they've played the past couple of games, in some weeks. And they don't look like the team that hadn't won in like 7 games coming into the playoffs. So this could be a very interesting series. And if you're the Jets, you absolutely want this one to go to at least 6. If the Stars can keep doing that and get, steal and or even just flat out earn a major road win here in the next couple of games, that would be really important potentially for the Jets should, again, the Jets beat the Blues. Now, I'm fairly confident Winnipeg is advancing. You've already got the 2-0 series lead. You took both games on your own ice, and there, in my mind, is a very good chance that the Jets get at least one game here in the road half. So I'm not too stressed about it, but obviously anything can happen. That said, if we are planning ahead, we do have plenty of other series to keep us occupied, and so we'll keep talking about that eventual second and potentially third round matchups should the Jets advance. But at least for the time being, if you are scoreboard watching for the postseason, this is coming up Winnipeg, right? The Jets will have had potentially more rest than a number of these teams. As long as the Jets can keep St. Louis to at most 1 or 2 wins, that'll give Winnipeg a nice little advantage as some of these other series are playing a bit later. Now, the last Western Conference series, and this one is more just fun to watch in general, but it is LA-Edmonton, and if you missed that game, you missed an absolutely insane thing. I was tabbing between that and Dallas and Colorado. A little more interested in Dallas, Colorado, just because of the Jets' playoff implications, but LA, man, they had a 4-0 lead, and they blew it, right? They were getting to the point where, they were having to claw back an extra goal in the third period to make it like 5-4, then, Edmonton ties at 5-5, and somehow the Kings, in whatever weird devil magic they summoned for the last minute or so, managed to steal back the lead and made it 6-5 in one of the craziest opening playoff games of the whole round, right? Obviously, there have been some big score lines, and, some of that's more on the Eastern side, but man, yeah, I don't think anyone expected that result. But I will say that I've had LA in this series as the favorite for me. I know that the Oilers have McDraisaitl and Bouchard, but you look at the rest of the team, and even with McDraisaitl, I'm not sure those guys are 100%. I think McDavid probably is, and he looks to be pretty good so far. He had a huge hand in like most of their goals that game. But Draisaitl, I'm not so sure about. And Bouchard, I think, has had a couple of decisions where he'll probably not love the outcome. So very intriguing, I guess, first couple of games for the West. But for the Jets, if you're scoreboard watching again, you are probably feeling pretty good about how this potential revenge tour bracket might start to shape up. So as we go through this first round, we'll continue to update and track that. It's going to be a fun ride. I'm looking forward to it. But of course, the Jets ain't the only ones playing on the on the Eastern Conference side. Things have been a little bit chaotic. Some surprise results in some ways. I wouldn't say shock in any particular respect. I think some of these game results are relatively within expectation. But yeah, we'll talk about those in a brief second, especially the Battle of Ontario and Florida. But before we do, did want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. And this also applies to NHL hockey, so if you are betting on the Jets or any other team, they track, similar stats that are equivalent in hockey, whether it's goals, assists, all that fun stuff, they've got it tracked. And after the game starts, you can even combine live prop bets into a single game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting about the, obviously the playoffs are underway. We are tracking and following all the way through. And on the Eastern Conference side, things have been relatively intriguing, not too dissimilar from the West. But, for the Jets, maybe a little bit less followed than the Western Conference playoffs, but still, you do kind of want to see who emerges out of this absolute melee of what on the face of it was going to be some mediocre matchups. The drama has been a lot more exciting than anticipated, especially if you're looking at the Atlantic Division stuff. The Metro and sort of the wild card there, less interesting. But the Atlantic, holy cow, man, what a first couple of games for those series. The Battle of Florida just wrapped up earlier, and I don't know if anyone really anticipated the Lightning going down 6-2. But yeah, they got smacked. And this was kind of a shock. I mean, the Panthers are, don't get me wrong, a very good team. There's a reason that they are the defending Cup champs. But, the Lightning really had a good early run of play and then found themselves down 2-1 at the end of the first period. And you look at how then things started to really unravel. And it just seemed like the Panthers created chaos, got in front of Vasilevsky. And I don't know, the Lightning just didn't really seem to react. And so, that is a very prominent opening statement from the Panthers, who are actually playing on the road. So they've already won a huge game away from their own rink. And if you're the Lightning, that does not feel great. Tampa, I would say, is one of my top picks out of the East. And so if they get knocked out early, that whole bracket suddenly goes to crap. So will be very interesting to see how the Lightning respond for game 2. This is going to be a very interesting series. These two teams have a lot of recent history, and so that could be a very fun one and very potentially a huge impact on who out of the East emerges in the Cup Finals, because Tampa is probably one of my biggest favorites there. But if they get knocked out early, that could be fascinating. On the Battle of Ontario side, Toronto is now up 2-0 in the series. This one a little closer in game 2. The first game, obviously, the Sens completely lost their composure, kind of came apart at the seams, and Toronto really took advantage of some questionable officiating and just absolutely laid a walloping on the Sens. Game 2, the Leafs did start strong, but then the Sens kind of clawed back and really had a big response, and they tied it up late. And then in overtime, those mistakes and things that you can't make, Ottawa made like 2 or 3 of them in a sequence, and Max Domi ended up scoring the game winner. Just not really at the races, man. The Sens team, for the confidence that their fans had coming into this run, definitely seems like they have had a little bit of a rude awakening as to what happens when you start facing the top seeds. Toronto, for whatever anyone wants to say about them, this year they are legit good. They're coached by a recent cup winning coach. And while I think the second game was, a lot less up to their usual standard, they have been through this before. And the Leafs, for whatever anyone will say about them, they're a legit good team. I hate admitting it, but this Ottawa team I thought was already going to be a little bit up against it, and now they are limping back home with a 2-0 series deficit. Probably see how this one's going to go, but again, you never know. It's the playoffs. Maybe the Sens can have a big response. I am not counting on that one in particular. But, if you're looking for other interesting parts of this Eastern Conference picture, Washington and Montreal wrapped up their first game. The Caps ended up winning in overtime and I can't believe this is a thing, but this was Ovechkin's first overtime playoff goal. The dude has been playing for like 20 plus years, and this was his first overtime goal in the playoffs. I didn't think that was even a thing, but wow, at age 39, here he has yet another career milestone. A great net front tap in that he found. Somehow you just leave nearly 900 goals of offense wide open at the last second. But let's be honest, the Habs don't exactly defend well. So despite a valiant effort from Montreal, where they were definitely outplayed, but still showed some real spirit, yeah, you probably know that the series is not going to be one where they are likely to walk away the victors. But hey, again, it is just game 1, so maybe they can steal a game 2 somehow if they can figure out how to defend for more than 5 minutes. The last series is probably one of the more lopsided, I guess, and I think everyone basically called the Canes to win out. It looks like it's going to shape up that way. Carolina up 2-0. New Jersey did play their second game pretty valiantly. I thought that they had some of their strongest performances between these first two games, but they're just beat up. And the Canes, they're organized. They've had a lot of playoff experience recently. They're probably looking for some level of revenge after some recent playoff outings that have really not gone, Carolina's way. So, this series I don't think is too exciting. I don't really think that anyone outside of maybe the Caps in this Metro uh, bracket is really too scary for the Atlantic. I really feel like out of all of these divisions and little playoff pools, I'm looking at the Atlantic to have the representative for the Cup final this year. I just feel like that portion of the bracket is significantly stronger. But part of this whole thing is going to be obviously a marathon, not a sprint. And so who can stay the healthiest, who can outlast and sort of survive the fatigue, the mistakes, the OT games that continue to drag on, that's going to be the squad that makes it through. It's always the case, but especially this year, I feel like because it's a pretty wide open playoff field, all these teams kind of look at it and say, why not us? And so for the Jets, I'm kind of feeling good about this coming playoff bracket. I feel like the picture that's starting to form is favorable. So if you're the Jets, if you're looking at the East and you wonder who would you ever want to play in a Cup Finals, I guess for me, personal wish fulfillment would be the Caps. It's local to me, and I feel like it would be awesome to have a repeat, or not really a repeat, but really the matchup that we should have had in 17-18 had Vegas not ruined all of our fun. But realistically, you could potentially see maybe the Jets against the Panthers. That'd be fun. Obviously, to get to that portion of the bracket, you've got to go a really long way. We are talking, this is in June, right? So for Winnipeg, let's just make it through this first round, and then we can start dreaming of Cup Finals later on in the postseason. But yeah, man, I've really been thinking that this year for Winnipeg was going to be one of their best chances to go deep in the postseason. And so far, it does look that way. And I'm hoping that all these teams that continue to drag their series out, to exhaust each other, to tire one another out, starts to benefit the Jets. And of course, amidst all of this, Winnipeg is really trying to just stay healthy, and get a couple of guys back. The news has been intriguingly positive for the Jets lately. I will say that I still don't think that anyone who's out right now is going to have an impact in the next immediate couple of games. But, for the Jets, I don't think that you need to worry about that. Winnipeg has already performed so well as is that I look at how the Jets have played and I'm like, yeah, you can actually conceivably rest guys. You can wait till they're 100%. You don't have to put it back in. They've played this well already without a couple of their biggest, offensive drivers and stars. You have to like Winnipeg's odds, not only in this current round, but in subsequent rounds if they can keep their stuff together. So, yeah, some really exciting times for the Jets, some very good early signs. And I just continue to feel like kind of like some of these teams that have really carried over their regular season performance. I feel like the way that the Jets have played for the last month and a half heading into the postseason has really transferred to their playoff form. All respect to the Blues. I think that they're a good team. And I think it's really admirable that they won out basically to get where they are. They didn't quite win every single game and they had a minor bump in the road at the end, but for all intents and purposes, I mean, they had one of the hottest streaks ever seen in NHL history. So all credit to them. They had a great run. But, here you are facing a very experienced, pretty deep Jets team that has found ways to really dig deep and start to dictate the pace at 5v5. So lots of excitement there. Really can't wait for Game 3 on Thursday. But of course, like I said, there has been some injury news. Arniel is perhaps hinting at something. We'll chat about that in a little bit and how much I really believe that, how much I really think that that's going to be a factor in the remainder of the series. But before we dive into that little note, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. And they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. Now, I'm personally somebody who likes the shelled variety. cracking them open, grabbing a little nut out there, and enjoying the tactile portion of it is always a great reward. It's probably because I'm from Maryland. I like cracking open crabs, so open nuts is probably a pretty similar thing. But maybe you are looking for something that's just a grab and go, right? You want max convenience and good seasoning and all the no-shelled varieties that you can choose from. Well, Wonderful Pistachios has you covered, whether you're dropping off the kids at school or you need to pick me up at work. They have got the perfect snack for you. And again, don't forget, Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. So if you're ready to get started, get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just chatting about, for Winnipeg, some really good news. The Jets are starting to get healthier. They're starting to edge closer and closer to, getting to full strength. And obviously for Winnipeg, this is a pretty big deal. Although I think if you're looking at how the Jets have played, maybe not a necessity right now. The Blues, for as much as they've been a pain in the butt, haven't really had an answer for the most part at even strength. All of their scoring basically has come on the power play in the first 2 games. And you look at how the Jets have played at 5v5, and you're like, man, you are feeling real good about Winnipeg's performance. Whether that's going to continue in both road games, we'll have to see, right? The Blues are going to have to come out really aggressive. I think St. Louis has really tipped its hand in the first couple of games as to how they're approaching the series. They've started both very fast and very aggressive, trying to take advantage of the Jets' early mistakes, maybe some rust, and jump the Jets, but it hasn't worked yet. They have gotten some early leads, and that's certainly helped their cause, but not enough for them to actually be out of touch. And the Jets have ended up, catching up. So you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, we don't really need Ehlers and Vilardi to come back immediately. Now, Ehlers, we still don't really have a clear timeline. I really feel like it will be the second round because, with the NHL stretching the playoff scheduling this year, I normally would complain about this, but I actually think it's going to work out great for the Jets. It's so stretched out over the next few weeks that I think the second round is a likely return time. When in the second round, I can't really tell you, but that would be my best guess. And if the Jets can kind of finish the series early and maybe get some rest while other teams are playing, I think that would be really helpful. Heal up, get ready for what's going to be a very difficult round 2. But of course, you still got to get through these next couple of games against a tough Blues team that I don't think is going to get swept. I do think that they have a win or two somewhere in here. I think it's going to be a hard-fought end to the series. And whether Vilardi takes part in this, Arniel was asked about it. Of course, game 3 is on Thursday, and he said, well, he kind of winked and told the media that he's not ruling it out, but he's waiting for the jersey that he's wearing in practice to change from non-contact. And so for me, I don't think that really means too much in terms of him coming back for game 3. I would highly anticipate that the Jets are going to slow play it. There's really no reason to rush him back. I think that this is a great opportunity for the Jets to keep going with what they've got. Your top line's cooking. Your depth scoring has maybe been a little bit of an issue, but who cares at this point? It's not been that big of a deal. Even having a pairing of Stanley and Shen really hasn't hurt the Jets too much. So, the Blues haven't been able to really punish the Jets for any of the injuries or maybe less ideal parts of the lineup. And so you're feeling good about how Winnipeg has been in the series. And you think to yourself, well, why rush him back? You don't have to put him in for game 3. I'd personally prefer Vilardi, even if he does return, to be a little deeper in the lineup anyways. So at that rate, just, give him some time to heal up. You don't have to bring him in. But I think even if he was feeling relatively good to go, I don't think he'd be coming in for game 3. The Blues have been pretty physical. They've laid out the body a fair few times. And with, Gabe's health being such a big topic of late, I don't think that the Jets are going to really risk it. He's a huge part of that power play, and the Jets' man advantage really hasn't been the same without him. So, just let him heal up. And then when he does come back, I do kind of wonder where he plays, right? I'm pretty sure that Arniel will go back to the well of the top line, but I do hope that with what he's seen of Connor Scheifele and Iafallo, to me, this is one of the most no-brain decisions I've ever seen. You don't really have to think about it. CSI kicks butt. I hope that they stay together for the rest of the playoffs. Until they prove that they can't handle it, they should be your default top line. They've played so well. I know that I was always on the Ehlers, Scheifele, Vilardi thing, but this combination also works. I mean, if it does, I don't care. I just want a good top line that sets the pace for everyone else. And if it's a weird combination that people aren't really thinking about, who cares? It works. Is it perhaps the most ideal it could be? Maybe not, just because you would want to figure out ways to get your other, top 9 lines a little more scoring help and to really spread out the wealth. But in terms of what we're seeing, I think it's been awesome. It's been owning shot share at a 60% and expected goal share at a 60%. It's played so well that I'm just if Vilardi goes back up there, I really feel like the Jets are just missing the importance of their so-called depth. For Iafallo to have come into this role and really just run with it and allowed Scheifele and Connor to do their thing at such a profoundly elite level, I think that's where, the value of how Winnipeg is built really comes into play. I've always said the Jets have to win by committee. They have to win in other ways. And so far, I think Winnipeg, through injury, has really found their stride. We always joke, I would say a joke, but it is kind of half serious. Injuries have often helped the Jets find really intriguing and perhaps even ideal line combos, and I think we've seen that again. And, the Jets have played such defensively stingy hockey to where, with Vilardi potentially close at hand, you just don't need to rush it, right? Winnipeg is already dominating at 5v5. I expect that to mostly continue through the series. I think the Blues will push back, and I do think that they're going to push hard. But, this is the time where you have the luxury of saving your best, secret weapons, right, that are currently healing up and in reserve for the future rounds. So don't rush it. Slow play it. Be smart. This is your best chance at a cup likely in the next couple of seasons. And, with all that in mind, with this playoff field continuing to develop the way it is, just stay the course. I think the Jets have done a fantastic job so far. Keep going at it. And when they're fully ready to come back, then you can work them back in. But for now, you know what? The Jets are cruising. And I think that is a real testament to how good and deep this team has been so far. So looking forward to Thursday. We'll have a preview of that game on tomorrow's episode ahead of it. Obviously, it's going to be a later start, so we'll have the recap on Friday. Really hoping for some big victories. And then, of course, this weekend we're going to have the huge game on Sunday. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. We will see you back here tomorrow with a preview ahead of Winnipeg versus St. Louis. But for tonight, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets, go.